Welcome to Bulletin Bytes, your podcast from the Bulletin Box, a place where we bring people from different walks of life to talk about life. I'm your host, Tivo, and today we have with us Lavinia Thanapathy. Now, Lavinia is a TEDx speaker. She's also named as LinkedIn's top 16 voices from Singapore. She is from Singapore, but currently settled in Berlin, Germany, managing a multicultural, multiracial family and embracing all the craziness that comes with it. And today she's here to talk about how to embrace your craziness. So welcome, Lavinia.
Thank you for having me. This is so exciting to be here with you today.
Great. And Lavinia, as I was giving the introduction to our audience, you manage a large multicultural, multiracial family, and you've given talks about embracing craziness. Define a crazy day in your life.
A crazy day is every day. I'm afraid there are no normal days. There are just crazy days. It's not that crazy is a bad thing. It's not something we look for. I certainly don't go out looking for crazy. I'm not an actual crazy person. It's just with a life that's very, very full of change. And we're a diplomatic family, which means we move around the world a lot more than most families will ever experience in their lifetime. And so we get used to the madness. You have to develop some habits that help you deal with this madness.
Right.
I didn't know at the time that I was building these change muscles. It's only much later on that it occurred to me, hang on, these are things that we do repeatedly and things that I see around me. So because I'm always surrounded by other people who live an international life, I see it, the people who are successful at doing this, the people who are really good at doing this crazy, trek around the world with all your stuff and your whole family and all your everything, including your career, which usually has to take quite an inventive route, when you're moving around the world.
So how does one develop these change muscles that you're talking about? Because currently we are living through one of the biggest change that we could ever live through in our lives. We did not live through World War I, World War II, the Cold War, but we are living through this pandemic, So how does one develop these change muscles?
That's a really good question. So you develop muscles the same way you develop like physical muscles. Not that I have very many myself, but in principle, when you develop like actual muscles, you have to work on them, right? You have to go to the gym, you have to lift weights, and then you lift a little bit more and a little bit more. And it's not that ever in your life you're going to be called upon in an emergency situation. Here, lift 2 20-kilo weights just like this. It's never going to happen.
Right.
What you're doing is you're building up those muscles so that in the event you need to pull on something, hang on to something, whatever it is you're required to do with your arms, you have the strength to do it.
Right.
And just like that, it's the same thing with change. What you're doing is developing really good mental habits. The problem with change is we always focus on the process. And the process is absolutely important. We need to know what we're going to do. What we don't focus on, either in our companies or even in our own lives, is what's going on in our head, the mental exercises, the mental wellness it takes to cope with change. And I think that's where the muscles need to be built. We all are really good at making lists. Lists are not my problem. I can make lists till the cows come home. I have lists and albums and all kinds of things, particularly, for instance, when we move. I have all these details, but that's not what makes a successful move. A successful move means everyone in the family has bought in, that we've created a safe environment for us to leave, to re-enter into. And some of those things are, one of the things that our family does very clearly is we don't even consider what normal is. Our mantra is never mind normal.
Right.
Because honestly, if you're worrying about what normal looks like, you will never know what fantastic, amazing things you can do in your life. Right. So we really don't ever think of ourselves as abnormal or other people as normal. And when I learned that because of my hair. I learned that because this crazy curls in my head, this is my natural hair.
Right.
And when I was a kid, all I wanted was straight hair. I went to school in Singapore. Everyone had straight, shiny black hair. Oh my God, how much I wanted straight, shiny black hair.
Right.
And I did not. Yeah. I had this. And at school, the teachers would make me pull it back in the tightest ponytail, braid it, whatever it was, that it wouldn't allow the curls to show. And
Mm,
after many years, it really occurred to me, this is part of who I am.
right.
It is what it makes me stand out. It is what people remember me for, and it is what I'm comfortable with. So
Right.
these crazy curls, there's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing normal about straight hair, and there's nothing abnormal. So when I learned to never mind normal, it certainly sat a lot better with me.
Never mind normal. Yes, because we all have our own definitions of normal. And before we get into
Right.
the details of what taught you and what sort of brought you into this change management, if I may say so, we need to tell our audiences that Lavinia is married to a German diplomat, right?
Yes.
And has traveled the world with him and has a family of six, if I'm right.
Well, we have five children
Five
in
children and
total,
a
and the two of us, so actually we're seven. But I must say, my stepchildren. So we have stepchildren, an adopted child, and then our biological child.
right.
So we are actually a very mixed family. We are what they call a blended family.
Lovely.
And now my stepchildren are all adults, so they don't move with us. They didn't move with us this last
Okay.
time, but they have moved with us in the
But
past. And
but
we moved
am I right in assuming that this whole idea of change in you and how you found that change can be a huge factor in our personalities once we embrace it, once we embrace what is normal in our lives, that came from this multicultural, multiracial family that you are a part of?
Oh, definitely. I've never, so I lived in Singapore till I was 18. And then I went away to university in Australia. And then I moved to the UK. And then I had another, so I had a first husband there who was British. And then we moved back to Singapore. And then I divorced and remarried and then lived. So yeah, so I've never had the opportunity to live in one place for very long. And
Right.
it seems to have been something that just it just didn't present itself to me, this option, of having a life that didn't go crazy all the time. And
Right.
in a way, I'm quite grateful for it. So in
Exactly.
other
And we are
people's lives,
grateful. And we are grateful that
yeah, well,
you lived through those experiences for us to now learn from you.
yeah, exactly. Look, it's funny. You don't think of them as blessings at the moment.
True that.
Not all of us look at the change that's coming. It's often catastrophic. Can I say
Mm,
change often presents itself as catastrophic in some
mm,
way?
true.
And at that moment when it appears, no one's saying, "Yay, bring it on."
Mm,
I'm certainly not standing there, with the prospect when what we call our marching orders arrive, and we know, look, you're going to have to be reposted again. When it arrives, and we know it's going to arrive. It's not that it's a surprise for us. We know it's going to come,
mm,
and but when it arrives, it's not like I'm popping the champagne. There's work to be done.
yes.
It's just making sure that we have those quick transitions of seeing it as opportunity very quickly.
Right. So if you were to sort of break it down for our audiences in your journey through these times where you had to change physically, mentally, location, relationships. So if you were to sort of break it down to us in terms of how we can identify change in our lives and be prepared for it.
Yeah, look, there are some very good habits to have. One of the things is to have a life that's not just about you. And by this, I mean always being on the lookout for belonging to a community, because one of the root causes of anxiety and depression in our society today is that we don't have a strong a feeling of belonging as we used to. For the first time, we're living very, very individual lives. And this is not how we evolved as human beings. We evolved to be part of a group. And there's nothing actually that brings us, we don't think so, because we keep being told that we are all individuals and we need to live this individual. It's not really historically what makes us happy. And so for me, I've always been part of some community. I've always looked for something to belong to, and very quickly, I'm always looking for some other group to join with. And I belong to all kinds of different groups. I belong to the groups at school. I belong to the groups with my, as a spouse of a diplomat, we often have groups. So I belong to those. I belong to groups of professional women, of professional speakers, of change makers, of all kinds of groups at different levels of seniority, different levels of formality
Right.
and with different levels of interaction, but they all add to my life. And it's by giving back. It's by doing something that you don't get a direct benefit for. None of this work that I do, I get a direct benefit for.
Right.
But by putting these ideas into and contributing to the conversations,
Right.
You reap no end of rewards, and you never feel out of place anywhere.
Right. So community is a huge part of the change, and belonging to a community. But what happens, Lavinia, is that if you find yourself in a situation or in a social standing where you cannot connect to the community, then what happens? If you find yourself in a place where after having made the effort, you don't find yourself belonging to that community. How does one deal with that change then?
Oh, that's so hard. And so many people feel that a lot.
Mm.
It's not an uncommon experience. The first thing I want to say if you're in that situation, this is not an uncommon experience. There's nothing particularly unlovable about you that you can't fit into a community. It usually
Beautiful.
just takes a different way of looking and approaching it.
Mm.
It's the first is to realize when you don't belong to a community that you have an unmet need. And unmet needs are often a source of huge anxiety. So know that if you are feeling that this lack of connection to a community, that you probably feel some level of anxiety and depression, there's nothing wrong with you. This is just our natural reaction to not fitting in yet. And that the secret is yet. You just
Right.
haven't found it yet.
Right.
And to keep telling yourself that it's just not yet. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist at all. And one of the wonderful things about the internet, for all the problems it brings, it allows us to connect with people all over the world. And even here, I live in Germany. I speak German, but very badly. Can I say really badly? But I get by, and I have a huge community here that I manage to connect with, primarily in English.
Yeah.
And it's all kinds of different groups. And I've only been here 7 months. Partly, I'm very experienced at doing this.
Yes.
And it does get easier the more often you do it. I have to do this. If you've had to do this 3 times in your life, I've had to do it like 15 times. So it's it's something I've gotten used to doing.
Right.
And so what I encourage you to do is just try. And until you find the right vibe,
Right.
the first one you join might not be the right one.
Right.
And you might only find like one person to connect with. The whole
Right.
community might not be for you, but maybe there was one special person that really, someone you want to go out with and, continue to know. It doesn't matter, honestly. Just keep trying. There's no logbook that's being kept against you. It's no report card. This person tried 10, didn't find a single one. This one tried 2, found 2.
Right.
There
Right.
is no report card. There is no nothing. Be kind to yourself, but it is
Right.
a need.
You
You
said it
are
so
facing an
beautifully.
unmet need.
Right. You said it so beautifully that there's nothing in you that is not lovable. I mean, you just haven't found the right community yet.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so
Yep.
beautiful. That's so beautiful. In your talks about embracing change, you've also, like in the beginning of the talk, also you said to bring on the normalcy and to define your own normalcy. Have there been instances in your life, other than the curves, where you found that your normal was different than the other person's normal?
All the time. Like all the time. I mean, goodness, look at me. I'm a brown person in the middle of Berlin. Look, it's not, I'm never normal. I never fit in anywhere. And it's really important to be able to own that.
Right.
That I'm a Singaporean. I'm not, and the bulk of the people in Singapore, you look around, you've seen, it's mostly Chinese.
Yeah.
I'm not Chinese.
Yeah.
My family has been in Malaya for a very long time, but I am never going to be the majority anywhere. I'm Indian. There are 1 billion Indians in India. None of them will own me because, one, I don't speak any Indian language because
None?
I've been in None, not even the one. I'm Tamil. So, but I don't even speak of all the Indian languages. I love it when people ask you, do you speak Indian? I'm like, which one? You don't have many languages. It's really, so yeah, we have this plethora of languages out of India, and I don't speak a single one because my family has really been in Malaya for a very long time.
Right.
Even my grandparents were born there. So I speak English as my mother tongue, as my father does. My mother is the last generation that speaks any Tamil.
Okay.
And she didn't think to teach us. And then But my mother was very insistent and very wise to teach us Chinese. So at school, we did Mandarin at school. And because it's just the nature of everything, we spoke a little bit of Malay enough to get by.
Yeah.
And now I speak German as well, badly, but I speak German. And so, so, if I met another Indian person, the only language we'd have in common is really English, and possibly German if I met them here. So, so I know I'm never going to be the majority anywhere. And I think my children also, my stepchildren, even my own child, none of them think they're going to be normal anywhere in the world. They know they're going to be different. And often they seek out other different people. Can I tell you, none of they seek out, this is what they also feel at home with.
Right.
And so you find a community. And I think knowing that that's what you need.
Right.
That knowing that community is a goal, that you want to be part of community. I think that's an important thing. I don't think our general, the zeitgeist encourages us that way.
No.
There's a lot of individualism. So
Right. So there are two things that we've spoken about. First, be prepared for change, find a community. Is there anything else that you want to add to this, which will help us embrace this change in our lives?
Well, the third area that I usually talk about in my talks is around confidence. And one of the big areas around confidence, a lot of people suffer, and often high achieving people suffer this a little bit more than honestly average people, is that it's called imposter syndrome. It's when you yourself doubt your right to be in a room, that you should be doing this. It's the who do you think you are?
You have spoken to my biggest fear, that someday somebody is going to find out that I don't know anything about the job that I do, and they're going to know that I'm just faking my way through it.
Look, it's knowing that you're not alone. Again, it's if you talk to enough people, you'll realize everybody is battling imposter syndrome at some level. And that the clincher for me was when I realized that even Einstein had imposter syndrome. Even he thought he would be found out someday, as not. And so did Maya Angelou. And so all these. And I watched an interview with Christine Lagarde, one of the most accomplished women in finance in the world. And she said the first day she went in as chair of the ECB, she went in and she opened the door and she said, and all these men in the room, and she's like, oh my God, do I really belong here? And so if people like that feel it, know that you're not alone. It is really a common feeling, and it often happens when we step up, when we are stepping up, when we are stretching ourselves into something new. And part of it is also to know the difference between something, when you get criticism, think about whether it's actually criticism that is of your character or of the context that you are in.
Right.
Yeah? Some of it is about the stuff, and some of them are things that you need to improve yourself. It's not to ignore feedback entirely, but be clear when it's about character and when it's about context.
Right. And
they're not the same thing.
Right. And sorry to interrupt you. When you were talking about this, it sort of sparked a thought. A lot of women at workplace are put down or are looked down upon just for being women. So the criticism to a lot of women is not about the things that they're saying, but about just because it's coming from a woman.
Yeah, it's all this thing about, women needing to be liked, to be respected in the office.
Right. Like, and there's the fact that a lot of women, before giving their opinion, have to apologize. The fact that I'm sorry, but, and that makes me sort of,
There's so much of it in the workplace. There's so much of it in our homes, in part because women have only been in the workplace for actually a relatively short amount of time. In the formal workplace, women have always worked. Yeah. Let's get that straight. They've always worked. Women have always worked. Yeah. It's just in the workplace as we know it, in roles that men have had as well. It's been about 100 years, let's say. Yeah, it's been about 100 years.
Right.
And as a general rule, we've gotten accustomed, because of the nature of our patriarchal systems, that women are there in support roles. Right. The women are there as secretaries, never ever to take the main role.
Right.
It's always surprising to me, that women occupy so few, for instance, programming jobs in the world. The first programmers ever were women. They were the women who worked in Bletchley in the UK with those first big supercomputers that broke the German codes. And those computers were all 75% of the people who worked in those places were all women.
Wow.
And so the first programmers in the world were women.
Right.
But the thing is, breaking through is not the same as creating a pathway.
Right.
So one of the things that I think what we're at right now, we're at a moment in time where there are enough women. There's a critical mass of women, both in the middle and at the top,
right,
that we can create a real pathway to create much greater equality. And also for the men who used to think, 50-50 was something outrageous. How dare women believe that they should occupy 50% of and yet men have been occupying 100% of the roles in most of our decision-making bodies since the beginning of time. And we don't question it. But somehow 50% of the population asking for 50% of the say is somehow shocking to us.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of change in attitudes and a lot of change in mindset, both for men and women. But I think one of the things in the last few years that has concerned me is how much we're trying to fix women rather than fix the system. And so we really do need to work very much on fixing the system. Women are not the ones who are broken.
Exactly. And when you talk about change, when you talk about community, we need to now bring that change into our communities to make sure that women have enough platform to go and showcase their talents and their skills. I must tell you this.
Yes.
I must tell you this, that I was just going through the list of speakers we've had on the podcast, and they've all been high achieving women, all of them. Like, it's not even like a Women's Day thing that we were doing. And I was so glad to share that with one of my partners here. That was really nice to sort of know that we have so many women, and we are also proud to sort of, give this platform to women like you to share your experiences with us. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for having us, and thank you for creating platforms for women to speak. There are not enough of those. There are still so many what we call manels, all male panels. And even in the month of March, which is International Women's Day, I have seen so many manels, and I've encouraged many men, and many men have put up their hands to say they will not speak on a panel where there are no women or no racial diversity.
Right.
So men themselves need to also take ownership of creating a more equal future. And I'm really delighted to see that you found, and this argument, you've just put paid to the argument that they say they don't know where to find the women. They should really call you. You have had no difficulty finding the women.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you, Lavinia, for sharing your insights into what makes us embrace the change in our lives, change the confidence and the community, and how we can create a community around us, which would give us the confidence to embrace the change in us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I hope this has been helpful to whoever's listened. And, I really wish everyone a wonderful experience with just embracing the crazy.
Right. But before you leave, I want you to give us one mantra that you've always lived your life by. As somebody who's lived through different geographies, lived through a multicultural society, as Singapore is now married into a multiracial, multicultural society, one mantra that you live by.
I'm going to go with the one that I've already shared, which is never mind normal.
Yes. What is normal anyhow?
Right.
A boy with crazy hair.
Or a girl with crazy hair.
Exactly. Thank you, Lavinia, for this wonderful, wonderful chat. We would love to have you back on our show someday and talk about what it means to be an Indian, a brown person, as you said, in a world stage that you are in, and how that helps you to become the person that you are.
Oh, thank you. I'd love to come back and talk about that.
Thank you so much. And guys, please follow us on all different social media channels for more such invigorating talks about women, about change, about embracing the craziness. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, Lavinia.
Bye.